Oh, there's a diver in there too. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda. I'm going to make sure my microphone's on. Yes, it is. And you'll notice I'm joined in the cavern by a diver right now. So they're actually doing a show. And we should probably make sure that we don't have, hopefully you're not hearing them and me talking at the same time. Hopefully it's all muted for you. But anyhow, I can I can actually magically wander between exhibit to another exhibit with the help of my friend Courtney, who is here at the Aquarium of the Pacific with me. I am standing right now in a studio with a screen behind me, so I can show you all the different parts of the aquarium and other things that we have to share. Um, but Courtney is going to be the one who's changing the things that you'll be seeing. So, again, welcome to another edition of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda, and I'm coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific. And this is our Blue Cavern exhibit, but this is not our biggest one here at the aquarium. Let's actually go over to, maybe in a moment, we'll get to see our largest exhibit, which is our tropical reef habitat. Because what we're going to be talking about today encompasses very large areas, very large volume, should I say, because our program today is all about the deep sea. So it's an Ask a Scientist. This is your opportunity, if you are watching, to text in any questions that you have to the number that you see on the screen during our program at 562-286-1838. Or if you're watching this at a later time, but you have questions that come to your head during the program, if you're watching this on, say, YouTube, you can email us with your questions at live@lbaop.org. And we will have an educator respond to you when we have someone available. So anyhow, let's go ahead and start exploring. Now, I love looking at this exhibit. Look at how beautiful it is. There's so many things to capture our attention. We've got the beautiful fish, we've got the bright colors, we've got all the different shapes and the structures of this coral reef. Well, when we talk about the deep sea, there can certainly be corals in the deep sea. Some deep sea corals exist. But I want you to think about what kinds of things are different in this view that we're looking at here compared to what you might imagine in the deep sea. So, what do you notice? Well, a lot of times a tropical reef is in shallower waters. So think about what shallower waters, how shallower waters might be different than the deep sea, the deep ocean. Well, one of the things I'm noticing right here is there's a lot of light. See, a lot of light coming through. And so that light is coming down, shining on the coral reefs. You've got the corals that have little algae inside of them that produce their beautiful colors and their food. And so we see a lot of colors in the shallower waters where the coral reefs are. But what do you think that color looks like as you go deeper? So as you go deeper and deeper in the ocean, do you think it's as bright and colorful as it is at the top? And why or why not? What do you expect it would be? Okay, so we're getting further from the surface, so we're getting less and less light. Well, did you know that not all light is created equal? So light is actually made up of different wavelengths. So I'm sure you're familiar with it if you've ever seen a rainbow or heard about using a prism. And what a rainbow is our ability to see different wavelengths of light that are normally all combined in one. So the light that we're getting from the sun has all these different wavelengths. White light is actually a combination of all the different colors, all the different wavelengths of light. And I know that sounds really confusing. You think, well, if they're all together, why wouldn't it be black? But it's not. And so all of those different wavelengths have, when they're separated out into their own special wavelength, they all have their own distinct colors. And if you think about the colors of the rainbow, that's why they're always in the same order. You're always going to see red on the top, then orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And so that's what the raindrops are doing, is they're creating a prism that as that white light shines through it, it separates it into the different wavelengths. Well, as the sunlight is coming through the water is also separating it into different wavelengths. What does that mean? Well, the different wavelengths have different strengths. So the shorter the wavelength, or I should say, sorry, The longer the wavelength something is, the weaker it is. It's not going to travel as far. And so what color is on the top of a rainbow? Red. Well, that means that red actually has a very long wavelength and it's very weak. It doesn't travel quite as far. Whereas the purple or the violet colors will travel farther because they have a shorter wavelength. That means that as colors are going into, as the light is going down into the ocean, it's being separated and the red is stopping higher, then the orange and yellow and green as it goes down. So that means that anything that would be colored red at the bottom of the ocean, guess what? The red wavelengths are never reaching down to hit it. So that means it wouldn't be able to reflect that red color back to our eyes to see it because the red never reaches it. So anything that's in the ocean that is colored red will be black. It will look like black because no red wavelengths, since red is the first one to kind of disappear as you go deeper in the ocean, it's the weakest one. Anything that's supposed to be colored red, you won't be able to see that color reflected back to your eye. So you might notice that a lot of animals in the ocean, in the deep ocean, have a red color. And you might think, well, that would make them stand out, right? They're so bright. But now we know that the red wavelength doesn't travel all the way down to the deep sea. So these animals are going to appear black. Now, of course, a lot of animals are going to, it's red. Now, this has a very interesting thing that it can do, speaking of light. Now, as we go deeper, there's less and less light. But think about anything else you've heard about animals in the deep sea or about the conditions in the deep sea. Is there any other light that's down there? Well, where does light come from? It comes from the sun, but where else does it come from? Well, I mean, we can stick something into an electrical socket and get light to shine, maybe our phones, but obviously that's not happening in the deep sea, but there is still light down there. So what is the source of this light? Well, it's the other living organisms that are there. And when a living organism can produce its own light, we call that bioluminescence. So here we have a picture of that amazing looking shrimp that's colored red that is actually spitting out some bioluminescence. Yeah, it's a big puff, this big sort of cloud right here of blue is light that is being created by this animal. Well, why would it be spreading light out? What would be the purpose of bioluminescence or light in the deep parts of the ocean? You're in a dark room and someone lights a match or just lights a small little candle. You can see that pretty easily and it will get your attention. No matter where you are in the room, that little bit of light in that very, very dark area is going to stand out. So what would be a purpose that an animal would want for having attention drawn to the location of that light? Well, a few different things. Now, maybe you've seen some movies that have shown animals swimming and they see this light and then all of a sudden they're attracted to it. Are there animals that use light to attract things to them for the purpose of eating? Of course. And one of those is the anglerfish. Now, I don't have a real live anglerfish in here, but I do have a model. So we have a model of this little anglerfish. Now check it out. I say little, let me camera, because I actually have this sitting on the document camera here. So you can see the size of my hand, my fingers compared to this. It's not very big, but let's check it out. What do you notice about this fish? And why is it called an anglerfish? Well, obviously it's a fish. You can see all the big fins that it has. It's got a big tail fin here. It's got a dorsal fin here. It's got an anal fin. It's got pelvic or pectoral fins here. But, I mean, it's kind of got a funny shape to it. It's kind of round, kind of hefty, right? But then it's got this, if you look at its mouth, it's huge. It's got an enormous mouth. Now, why do you think that might be important for an animal living in the deep sea? Well, probably to take advantage of whatever opportunities it has when prey does come close enough that it can grab it. A bigger mouth to grab, greater chance of grabbing their food. So now this thing right here, that's the cool part of this fish. Well, I mean, there's lots of things that are cool. In fact, you can look around and you see these little spots on it. Those are little photophores. They could actually light up. But this is the important one right here. This thing that's at the end of this long, what we would call, this would be what we call the lure. This is like this big stalk, kind of like a fishing pole. So the reason this is called an angler fish is because think about what an angler is. Have you heard of an angler before? An angler is someone who fishes, and they use their lines and a lure to attract fish over, and then the motion of that lure, making it look like it's something else, attracts the fish over to eat it, then they get hooked, and then the person who's doing the fishing is very happy. But in this case, this fish is using some bioluminescence on the end of its lure to attract fish over, almost like bait, like a fisherman would use. And then what they do is they bring that over, they kind of hang it down in front of their mouth so that when the fish gets close enough, or whatever prey is interested in that light, it's being drawn to that light that it sees in the darkness, then of course they've got these great big teeth that will be able to hold it and swallow it and keep it in place. So that's how this animal can find a meal in that deep, dark sea. Now, there's also something else that's interesting about this fish. If I flip it over to this side, do you see anything else? This is kind of a surprise. Well, this little fish, or this bigger fish, has a little fish attached to it. And believe it or not, this is not a baby fish. This is just another angler fish. This is the female, the mom, the big one is the female, and this is the male. So this is the boy fish. And the boys are a lot smaller than the girls. And so what the boy will do is he'll bite on and hold on to that female, and then she does all the shopping and all the eating and getting all the energy that she needs, and he just gets it straight from her. So anyhow, that is an angler fish, and I think it's really interesting that this one has a male attached to it. So this is one that can light up, and it can use that lure right there for attracting its prey. But think about other ways that light might help, besides being used for bait to attract prey to it. Are there any other reasons you can think of that an animal would want to draw attention using light? Well, there's actually a couple other reasons. Well, one, it could just be to communicate and get messages out there. Like, hey, I'm here. Is there anyone else in the area? Maybe if they're looking for a mate. Or maybe they're saying, hey, I'm here and I'm being eaten by something. Somebody come and save me. And that's kind of like what this is. So this ring of light that you see right here is from a jelly. And it is sending off, it's almost like an alarm. So what it's doing is it is drawing attention to the fact, and unfortunately we don't have a video of seeing this, but you could probably look it up online. And it has this beautiful movement of lights all throughout the whole top of the jelly. So what we're doing is we're kind of looking down on the top of the jelly right now, so we can see that round part we call the bell. And you would see other bioluminescent lights coming from the inside as well. And this jelly will flash these lights if it is about to be eaten, or if it is being threatened by something else nearby. Like maybe there's a bigger fish that's eating it. And so what it's doing is saying, hey, come help me right now. If you're hungry and you're looking for a big meal, there's something bigger than me that's right here. So come and get it. And it's one of the ways that they think that these animals use bioluminescence is by just sending out an alarm. And that's what this jelly does. That's how it uses its bioluminescence. Another reason an animal, like I said, might be glowing or trying to let other animals know that it's there is if it's looking for a mate. So mate attraction, helping find food, helping to be a distraction from food. So just like the shrimp that gave off that little bit of bioluminescence, basically what it was doing is creating a distraction, something that was surprising, so that anything that was maybe trying to eat this would be so surprised and maybe let this animal get away. Or maybe it would go after the light instead, like, oh, is that something better? Well, we can actually see this at the surface of the ocean too. If you happen to live in an area near a beach that has ocean waves. And if you've ever heard of something called red tide, well, a red tide is a phenomenon where we have all these little tiny plankton in the water called dinoflagellates that can produce bioluminescent light at night. But in the daytime, when they come up to the surface, there's so many of them, and they're kind of a reddish color. They make the water turn this reddish color too. Not totally red, but like a brown, orangey sort of color. And so when there are red tides, you can see this during the day, but at night, what do you notice here? As you're watching these waves, do you see some of that blue color? You can kind of see it off in some of these places back here. But keep watching. Where do you see blue? Don't see any now, but keep watching. Oh, there's some back there. Some in the back. But let's watch as this last wave comes in. Wow! Look at all that bioluminescence. So that's happening because as these little dinoflagellates are getting stirred up, well, they're creating bioluminescence. So the action of the waves is actually causing them to wonder, like, oh, is something happening? Let me light off this, give off my bioluminescence. So it's a distraction. And we also have another picture because if the waves themselves are creating this bioluminescence from this dinoflagellates, well then think about a boat going through the water at night. Imagine what would it be like if a boat was cutting through the waves, because then the waves, the water are being distracted by the boat. So you know how a boat has a wake behind it, or as it pushes through the water in front of it, up by the bow of the boat? Yeah, this is what we saw in Long Beach not too long ago. There, we actually got to see dinoflagellates releasing all these little bioluminescent bursts of light, even as the boat was going through the water. So this picture was taken by my friend Kira Mathis, and was kind enough to share it with us so we could use it for our program. So bioluminescence is pretty cool, but how does it happen? They're not plugging into anything. Well, animals that can create bioluminescence have the ability to have something called, or in their body, they have something called luciferin. It's a protein. And then they also have something called luciferase, which is an enzyme that helps speed up this reaction, or as a catalyst for this reaction. The presence of oxygen, and when the pH balance changes, then we can get light as a byproduct. And this is what we call cold light. So it's not giving off heat like most of the light that we're used to being in a room with, like we have in our studio right now. So this is cold light, and it's produced by these chemicals inside the fish's bodies. So bioluminescence, chemicals, important in the ocean, right? To light up and used for a variety of reasons. But what about other chemicals in the ocean? Oh, right here. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm standing in front of it. Let me show you what it looks like when we stir up some little deep sea fireflies. Well, we all know what fireflies are, right? These are animals that fly around, insects that we can see at night. Sometimes you might capture them and put them in a jar so you can see them for a little bit before you let them go. And your jar lights up with all these fireflies. Well, here at the aquarium, we had access to some what they called sea fireflies, and they're actually a type of plankton called an ostracod. And so what we did is we took some of the little teeny tiny plankton, we added some water, and we kind of stirred it up, and you can see as that water was stirred up, all the bioluminescence that was being released by these little tiny things right there in that dish called ostracods. So it's really neat to look at the light coming from bioluminescence from living animals. But let's also think about, I already lost my train of thought. What we said we were going to talk about, color and lights and, oh, chemicals, that's what it was. So thinking about when we're at the surface. Oh, and another thing is these dinoflagellates, these are like little, they're almost like plants that can propel themselves. They're like animal-like plant things. So dinoflagellates are like plants because they can take the energy from the sun and they can create oxygen and food. So that can't really happen, though, normally in the deep sea. Now, we know plants that are up at the surface, they're creating oxygen, just like the trees outside are creating oxygen for us to breathe. Well, in the ocean, plants can also produce oxygen, and phytoplankton, the little tiny plants, are creating a lot of oxygen that we breathe as well. But it's an important role for, or an important resource for the fish that are in the ocean that need to use that to breathe in the water, because we don't have gills, we have lungs, but the fish that have gills, they still need oxygen. They just get it in a different way. They get it from the water. So it needs to be in the water. So how is that oxygen getting into the water? Well, most of the time it's coming from phytoplankton, these little tiny plants that float around, get the energy from the sun during the day. But again, we're talking about the deep sea. So what's going to be different? There's no sunlight down there. So how are the things in the deep sea going to get the oxygen that they need? Well, instead of having photosynthesis, which is the process of getting the energy from the sunlight that the plants use, well, there's chemosynthesis. Chemosynthesis is using the chemicals that are coming from the earth itself and being released into the water. And here you can see this is a location of a vent. So in the deep sea, and we're talking miles underneath the ocean, we have these deep sea volcanoes and we have deep sea vents that release chemicals that the animals and organisms around it, or I should say the organisms around it, are able to use to create oxygen so that the other animals can breathe. Isn't that interesting? And so the different types, there's some vents that we call black smokers, some that are called white smokers. And so that's because the color that's being released from these vents are going to look different based on the chemicals that they're releasing. So around these areas, you often see many different types of organisms in an area that would normally be considered kind of a wasteland in a way, because you would think, how could an animal live down there without any light? And what else would be different? When you go deeper and deeper in the water, it tends to get colder. So a lot cooler. But again, with the deep sea vents, sometimes the water can be really, really warm in those areas. So it's creating an environment that is very different than what it might be, even just a little bit above it or off to the side a little bit. And so it creates this whole community of organisms that can live and thrive in the deep sea. So here we have a nice illustration of what it's looking like. So you have this mineral-rich fluid. You have it rising up to the top. You create this black smoker and all these vents that come here. And then here's a chemical reaction if you want to look at that. And chemosynthesis, that's what's happening in chemosynthesis. And then that cold water is going back down there and being recycled. And so we can have all these different types of environments on the bottom of the ocean that can host a lot of different animals. Can you think of any other animals you've ever seen around a deep sea vent, if you've heard of those before? In fact, I think we have a picture of one. There are some really interesting worms. Now, Courtney can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think so. I'm wondering if we have any of the tube worms. There's some really interesting tube worms that dwell in the deep sea. We may not have them. I might be thinking of another program that we have them in. And they're animals that live in just how these have like tubes. Oh, right over here. So we have these tubes, and there are worms that are living in here. And it looks like, oh, that must be their mouth. But these true worms don't actually even have a mouth. They're really strange animals, very strange organisms. They are still animals, but they live by these vents. And here we have a nice little crab that's living by these vents as well. And then these are probably a type of a coral, maybe even one that can bioluminesce. Now, this picture that we're getting here is very unusual because these are animals that don't normally see light. They're in the deepest parts of the ocean. The only reason we're able to see them and see the color, again, notice what color it is, red. The only reason we're able to see them is because of the method we use to get this picture. Now think about how you take a picture. Well, a lot of times we have a flash in the camera, right? So we had a flash with this, something that's lighting it up so we can see it. But how did we get someone with a camera down there? Do you think someone can scuba dive this deep into the ocean? Well, maybe we should define how deep the ocean is. Well, on average, if you were to take all the different parts of the ocean and average them together, it's about 2 miles deep. And that's actually pretty deep. Think about, have you ever walked a mile before? Maybe in a walkathon or something like that? Well, that's pretty deep. Now, think about if have you ever dove to the bottom of a pool before? Done some underwater swimming, and you'd go to the bottom Did you ever notice that as you go deeper, your ears start to feel funny? You get that pressure in your ears? Well, if you went to the bottom of a swimming pool, you probably went down maybe 8 feet, 12 feet, something like that. Now imagine, or oh, I know, you probably had to walk or run a mile at school before. Imagine if instead of walking that distance, you were actually swimming down into the ocean that deep. And think about all the pressure on your ears that must be getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's just 1 mile deep. The deepest part of the ocean is closer to 7 miles. It's like 6.8 miles. That's really deep. And so this is how we might explore the deeper parts of the ocean. Now notice this contraption here, it looks pretty cool. This is actually what we call a manned submersible, meaning that a person, or in this case it looks like 2 people, can actually go inside of this and travel down to some deep parts of the ocean. But even this can be difficult for people to do because of the great, enormous amounts of pressure. And so a lot of the exploration that we're doing and learning about the deep sea is coming from ROVs. An ROV is a remotely operated vehicle, like what you're seeing here. So it's kind of like an underwater robot that can go down and withstand pressure that people can't withstand, and it can get pictures. So see how it's lighting up that area? So it has a device on it that is lighting up the water and lighting up these animals that we can see that normally live in darkness. And then it's allowing the scientists who are operating this, usually by something like a joystick, some sort of operator, up on the surface, like up in a boat at the surface of the water. And they're able to control it using different types of controls, almost like a joystick and buttons and things, so that they can move arms, so that they can not only, or not just change camera angles, but they can also use things to pick things up and get samples of what's down at the bottom of the sea, where things that we've never seen before or heard of before. And so a lot of exploration is coming from remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, just like what you're seeing here. So this is Sebastian is the name of this one, from the Schmidt Ocean Institute. And we're learning a lot about the ocean this way. Now, in more recent times, actually just since 2019, before 2019, there were only 3 people, I believe, who had been to the deepest part of the ocean. And now that number is much, much higher because of someone called Victor Vescovo, who is an explorer who created basically a submersible that could hold people in it and could go down to the bottom of the ocean and then could come back up, and it was still in good enough condition to do it again. And so he's been able to take a number of different people down to the deepest part of the ocean. It's called the Mariana Trench, or Challenger Deep specifically, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. It's in the Pacific Ocean, and we are trying to learn more about it. But this is an area that is largely undiscovered because it's just so hard to get to, because we can't just go scuba diving down there because the pressure would destroy us. In fact, the pressure, as you go that far deep in the ocean, it's like 16,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. Imagine having 16,000 pounds all over your body in like a space that big. It would just be crushing to us. But we're learning more and more about it. Plus, the Mariana Trench is not exactly close by. It's not close to our shore. The most we know about the ocean is what's closer to our shores, the things that we can see and access easily. But there's so much ocean out there, and especially the Pacific Ocean. It is the largest ocean on the planet. If you ever look at a globe where you can spin it around, find the Pacific Ocean, and you will see that almost basically the big chunk of what you're going to be looking at is just going to be the Pacific Ocean. A lot of times when we see it on the map, we see, oh, part of it's over here, maybe part of it's over there. If we have to split up the whole entire, all the continents on one map, we have to divide the ocean in half, and it's usually on one side and the other. But when you put it together, you get to see just how big that ocean is. And so much is yet to be discovered, and it's very exciting to think about it. So if you come up with any questions about the deep sea, feel free. Again, you can email us. We're happy to answer any questions you have at live@lbaop.org. Or maybe you will be the one who gets to answer those questions, because scientists haven't been able to discover the answer to it yet. So if you're intrigued by being an explorer, then maybe marine science discovery in the ocean and the deep sea is just the thing for you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed learning about the deep sea with me. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Goodbye.